Hello, it is Tuesday, November 6th, and I think I'm gonna do some light vlogging for the Indigathon. I realized I have two books that are interlibrary loans that are gonna need to be returned to the library before I would ever do a monthly wrap up or anything like that. So, I'll just tell you my thoughts for those books as I go along. So the first one is this poetry collection. I talked about it in my TBR. It is Poems I Brought Down from the Mountain by Humberto Acabal. And the introduction was reminding me he's actually like the preeminent poet of Guatemala. Okay, I've had a chance to read a few of the poems, and they're really lovely. I am not a big poetry reader, but these are extremely accessible, and they're all on very down to earth, natural subjects. So we have had one about a mutt, one about a grandfather, one about a peach tree. I'll show you my favorite so far. It's called Cantos de Pájaros, Songs of Birds. And actually, the only part of it that's translated is the title. It hasn't even been presented in English or Spanish because, what would be the point? It's actually just the onomatopoeia of what the different bird sounds are, which is so cool. And, sometimes you're like, what does poetry offer that like couldn't be offered in just prose? And then you see a poem like this, and it just really, reminds you what's the point of poetry? Good morning. It is Saturday, November 9th. I think that's the date. I've been driving to an event in Davis, California, and man, it was so foggy and gloomy, even though it's already almost 10. It was really beautiful, and now I'm further inland though, away from the coast, and it just got really sunny. Stopping for gas. Anyway, I've been listening to the Stan Grant essay, and it's so lovely to listen to him read it in his, Australian accent. I am going to be at an event all day in Davis, and then I'll have another hour driving back, so making some progress on the audiobook, and I will update you. I am leaving Davis. I have to say goodbye to these beautiful fall trees, and it's going to be about an hour back. So I'll listen to a little bit more of my audiobook. Oh, I still have my name tag. Hello, so it is Sunday, November 10th. I'm back. I'm curled up in my bed because it is chilly here this week. I finished the essay, the Stan Grant essay I was listening to. I finished it on the drive, most of it on the drive home, and then I listened to about 20 minutes this morning, and there is a lot to unpack. Wow. So Stan Grant, he is a journalist in Australia. He gave a speech that went viral, and as he said, he kind of immediately became all things to all people. And, everyone had something to say about it. Everybody thought they knew what he meant. Everybody was suddenly touting him as, the Indigenous voice of Australia. And, that's my perspective coming into it. I don't know. I'm not familiar with other contemporary Indigenous voices from Australia. So it was super fascinating the way that he introduced this by talking about his process of searching within himself, doing research, looking back at his family's ancestry, really thinking critically about what did he want to say to the Australian people, what does he want readers and listeners to take away. So I love anything in fiction, nonfiction, where the author's voice is very strong. So what did I take away from this book? I
was definitely really fascinated by how it kind of rubs up against American Indigenous experience, and especially the idea of Native American urbanity, that this whole idea, this whole kind of false vision that's perpetuated that Indigenous people of whatever country are inextricably connected to the land, and when they lose their connection with the land, their culture is eradicated, and that certainly here in the US we have this idea that Native Americans all died out, or that they're all living on reservations, and it's just simply not true. I really think of Tommy Orange's book. Of course, that was such a watershed book for Indigenous lit here in the US. And it's set in the city where I live, so I have a very personal connection to it, and a very deep connection to the experience of the characters in this book. So the urban Native American experience is very alive to me. How Native American culture can adapt and thrive in cities, and how powwow culture happens in cities. People who build sweat lodges in their backyard, entrepreneurs who are opening Indigenous restaurants, based around traditional foods, but being presented in a modern urban context. Hip hop, Indigenous hip hop artists. So I have a real, point of reference for what is modern urban Native American culture look like, or what can it look like. Obviously, it can look a lot of different ways. And I didn't get a vision of that, what that would look like in Australia, from Stan Grant's essay. So I really do want to seek out some other voices that kind of portray that a little bit more. So I just finished Not Your Princess. Almost 2 full spreads here, just listing all the different contributors, which is really impressive given that it is a pretty slim volume. It's kind of like a magazine. And one of the great things that they've done, if the contribution is just words, like a poem, they've gotten another artist to add a visual element. So here you have Danielle adding an illustration, and I just chose this one because I immediately recognized her work when I opened it up, because I've been reading a picture book by Monique Gray Smith that she illustrates. It's been really great just delving into the world of Indigenous creators, and I'm already and kind of just getting to know the canon. So yay, Indigathon! I finally finished Poems I Brought Down from the Mountain. There is a prose piece in the middle of it, kind of him talking about his calling as a poet. One of the parts I loved was describing, I guess, kind of how he writes the poetry, how he edits it. Once the text is written, I let it rest. When I find myself with it again, I see that it has too many words. Then I begin to undress it until I leave it with the nakedness of a newborn. At other times, the opposite happens to me. The idea emerges and I need to dress her, and I go on trying one and then another until I leave her, according to me, as I think she should be dressed. Hey everybody, it is Thursday. I think it's November 21st. And I am really counting down till the end of this week when I get a full week off from work. And I just wanted to check in on kind of how the Indigathon has been playing out here at work for me. So one that I've been reading with classes is Hungry Johnny, and I featured this one in the recommendation video I did, which I can link and I'll put in the cards. And the kids have been really identifying with it. One of the things that I love about it is it shows the there's like 3 different Ojibwe words or phrases. It does this cool thing where if you sort of pause and you're like, oh, what does that mean? Let's look in the little glossary. It actually kind of like adds narrative momentum to the story, because the kid is like, he's having to wait. And 2 of the words that are presented in Ojibwe are, number 1, the grandma keeps telling him to wait. And then at one point, the grandma tells him it's time to eat. So when you actually get to the point where it's time to eat, it's like, oh, wow, like that's what she told him. He must be so excited. So that was a cool bilingual feature. And yeah, I think like the youngest, squirreliest, like least patient kid, you know, is really going to identify with this. Another set of books I've been reading, kind of depending on the age, is a couple of books by Monique Gray Smith. So there's this one called My Heart Fills with Happiness. And in this one, the illustrations are by Julie Flett. So my heart fills with happiness when I feel the sun dancing on my cheeks, things like that. The conversations that came out of this were like, put a humongous smile on my face, because the kids just naturally want to follow up. And, you know, if you ask them, what fills your heart with happiness? They just love to tell you. And I actually did a little bit of an activity where we sat in a circle and I just had a container that's a heart and like little heart-shaped pieces of paper, and every student got a turn to like literally fill the communal heart with happiness. And it was so sweet. A very similar one by the same author is You Hold Me Up. And this one's illustrated by Danielle Daniel, who I just mentioned. I noticed that she had a piece in the Not My Princess, and you can kind of see the similar style of illustration that she has in this book. And this one is bilingual in Cree. It's kind of like a similar conversation starter where you have like, you know, you hold me up when you comfort me, and you hold me up when you play with me, you hold me up when you teach me, things like that. And again, it's just like follows very naturally that kids want to share, you know, if you ask them who holds you up. So yeah, this has been really wonderful. And I would highly recommend all of those books, especially the Monique Gray Smith. I think are just incredibly universal stories that absolutely anybody of any age could read, and then be able to just have a positive conversation. So yeah, please let me know. Have you been reading any books with kids in your life? Do you have recommendations? All right, I'm gonna make it through one more day this week, and then I'm going to be on a vacation, so I can do so much reading next week. All right, see you later. Hello, it's Tuesday the 26th. I'm starting to lose track, as happens when you're on vacation. I'm a little further in the Francisco Yancakeo audiobook. I had a chance to do some lazy listening yesterday at a cafe. And so he is the son of basically a nanny. That's it was explained to me when I visited Chile that that's extremely common occupation, especially a few generations ago, for Mapuche women. And that's how he grew up. He was the son of a woman who was a nanny, and so he was the only child. He grew up alongside, you know, the children of the family that were the employers. I will say one of the things that's really refreshing about this book, I especially appreciate reading books, especially from older generations of queer people, where they don't have this like tortured fraught coming out. In his case, he had lots of other sources of trauma, but as far as being gay, so far, he basically just told his mom when he had a crush on this guy, and his mom was pretty cool with it and just told him to be careful. And that was that. So I'm not sure where it'll go from there as far as his queer identity, but that's just so nice. I am, I think, about 100 pages from the end of the break, and I had only read maybe the first chapter last week. So yeah, really, really deep into this story. I have to say it's not my normal type of read. So you can take my opinion with a lot of grains of salt. It took me a while to kind of get into it or connect with it because there's such a large cast of characters. Also, the subject matter is just, it's very depressing. It centers around sexual violence against a young girl, and it's an important topic. And I think I like the way that it's exploring how heavy the burden is on other women to protect each other, and how deeply they can feel it when they fail, and instead of feeling rightly that they've been let down by people in power, by society, by men. So I kind of hope that it comes to a little bit more of a hopeful place, or a place where the women in the story can kind of feel that they have more power. And that's kind of what it says on the back. It says that it shows the resiliency of Indigenous women and the unwavering power of family love. So far I'm not seeing the power of the family love. I'm just seeing a lot of, people struggling with problematic relationships and men in their life and sexual violence and being depressed about it. So it's not a very uplifting read, but I do think it's an important story, and certainly reading from a Canadian urban Indigenous perspective is not something that I've done, so I'm glad to pick it up for that reason. All right, I'm going to keep reading this, and I'm also going to dry my hair. I don't know what's happening here, and I'm going to film my TBR for the Queer Lit Readathon that's coming up the first week of December, and I'll come back and update later in the day. It's Friday the 29th, Black Friday. I have passed on going for a walk with all our guests that have been keeping us really busy to finally finish up the last chapter of the break, or the last section. And yeah, it came together in sort of the way I was hoping that it would. Family members reconnecting, and yeah, definitely just seeing more of the resiliency and hope of women, holding each other up, which was kind of what the book promised, and it ended as a little less of a downer. So I really appreciated that. I haven't started the last book on my TBR, which is Her Land, Her Love. So it's a little bit of a chunker. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get that wrapped up in the next couple of days over the weekend, but I will give it a try. The thing I want to say about celebrating Thanksgiving yesterday was we went over to my friend's cousin's house, who was actually out of town, but we were able to bring my friend's extended family together there. It's kind of like a bigger space, and they have a dishwasher. And another thing they had when we went in was on their counter they had a jar labeled for the Sogorea Land Trust. My friend's family and I, all like chipped in to leave that there for the cousin for when they get back. So that was just a really great tradition that I would love to continue if I continue to celebrate Thanksgiving here, which I haven't really done in the past. I usually have traveled to be with my own family. But yeah, here celebrating here on Ohlone land, that's a great way to sort of decolonialize and be in solidarity with Indigenous people here in the Bay Area. I mentioned it in one of my previous videos, but I'll just mention it again, that it is the Sogorea Land Trust is a women-led coalition to reclaim land here for the Ohlone people, and I will link down below more information about that. All right, I hope everyone's having a cozy weekend, and I'll try to wrap up my reading and wrap up this vlog in the next couple days. All right, it is bedtime, and I have actually made more progress than I expected in Her Life, Her Love. You can see I'm on page, I think it is page 126, because yeah, it's actually, even though it's I think more than 400 pages, it's I'm really speeding through it, and there's a lot of bilingual dialogue with long passages of Navajo text, so that just really inflates the page count. So yeah, I'm really glad that this is an enjoyable read, and that I should be able to knock it out this weekend. The lighting is terrible. It is rainy AF. It's so gloomy outside. It's like the middle of the afternoon. So we're just gonna cuddle over here by the bright spot of these flowers. It is Saturday, November 30th, which means this is it. This is the last day of the Indigathon. And good news, I have finished another book. I was able to race through and finish Her Land, Her Love this morning. This is by Evangeline Parsons Yazzie. And it was really good. It was really good. And this is the story of, what's her name? Ninaniba, who is Navajo,
and it says it starts out in about 1865 at the start of the Navajo Long Walk. I'm having a flashback to in my TBR, I think I may have said it was about the Trail of Tears, which obviously is not about the Navajo experience, and I knew this was a Navajo story, so that definitely came out wrong, but it's a similar story in the history of the Navajo, where they had to have a forced walk to a reservation. And this book was lovely. I would say it is definitely, like, do not go into it expecting it to be like a romance in the sense of sort of mainstream romance stories where the focus is on, characters meeting and, ending up together. This is more of just a lovely, poignant historical novel that's centered around the relationship of a woman and her husband, and just the story of the book in general, the way that the author was inspired to write it. She was inspired from growing up hearing stories from her grandmother, who it seems experienced it personally. And even though a lot of elders didn't want to talk about that time in their history, this author, did a lot of research and was able to base most of this book on real events and her own scholarship. And I learned a lot, and it was just so nice to read history like this from the Native perspective. Really appreciated the immersion in the historical detail. I'm always gonna enjoy a well-crafted historical novel over, a kind of hard-hitting contemporary, and that's just who I am. So I think there was a lot of value in the break, but I'm really glad I ended the Indigathon with Her Land, Her Love, and I would recommend it, especially if you've read, anything more contemporary by Navajo or Dene authors. For example, I read The Lightning Thief by Rebecca Roanhorse, and which is, a reimagining of, a post-apocalyptic future where the Navajo Nation, the Dene people, have been reestablished in their ancestral lands. And so reading about the real history and the real experience of people being removed from that land made me appreciate what was done in her book, to a higher degree. So yeah, really recommend. I think this is going to do it for the Indigathon for me. And I still have the audiobook that I'm in the middle of. I'm only about a third of the way through, but guys, it's in Spanish. It's not something I can rush through, so we're just going to have to finish that up in December. I'm really looking forward to seeing other people's wrap-ups, vlogs, and yeah, let's do this again next year.